Welcome back to America Talks Live. President Trump is saying he's going to prepare an additional 10% tariff on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. Trump says after the legal process is done, they will go into effect if China doesn't change its practices. Now, last week, the president said he would impose 25% tariff on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods. That move prompted Beijing to slap retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. So we are in, as Gina said in the last segment, a bit of a tit-for-tat trade war.
Yeah. Well, there have been some signs that China could lower tariffs on imported vehicles, and if that were to happen, it could bolster the auto industry here in the U.S. And analysts rather say that the big winners would be German automakers that build their luxury cars here in the United States, including, of course, BMW and Mercedes-Benz. Now, currently, there's a 2.5% tariff on cars shipped from China to the U.S. and a 25% tariff on cars shipped from the U.S. to China. So by lowering those tariffs, more car manufacturers will be able to sell foreign-made cars in the Chinese market, the largest vehicle market in the entire world, by the way.
Yeah.
And that is where we want to welcome in veteran attorney Ed Pasquale. He, of course, is the president of Tripp Scott Law Firm. As always, good to see you. Even Democrats like Chuck Schumer are supporting the president when it comes to these tariffs, if that tells you anything, saying that it's a smart move, but we should focus primarily on China, he says. Is this a good move on the president's part?
Well, you know, look, I'm not a big fan of tariffs, but I am a fan of fair trade between two nations. And our relationship with China is a very complicated one. It involves, as an example, influence over North Korea, the potential disarmament there. It involves a relationship where essentially, you know, you had a story today about the 10 millionth or the millionth, 10 millionth patent signed by President Trump, and America's Americans are entrepreneurial and inventors and innovators, and we certainly don't want those trade secrets stolen. So when you're talking about trade with China, you not just have to talk about some of the illustrations you gave about automobiles, the kind of disproportionate tariffs on our products going in there versus their product coming in here, but you also have to talk about trade secrets and the protections of intellectual property. In talking to my clients, some of the entrepreneurs I represent, they think it is a fair and even more even playing field with China would be very, very helpful to those who are trying to start businesses and provide manufacturing here in the United States.
Also joining us to weigh in on the conversation is Lindsay France. She is the host of The Politics of Business and the Politics Editor at IVN. Good to see you again, Lindsay. You heard Ed there mention when it comes to trade and also intellectual property, China's been accused of doing that. Is this more about trade, or is it more about China stealing intellectual property, in your opinion?
I think there are a couple of prongs here. I think that Trump's base really deeply feels that it's been done wrong by China and by foreign governments and by the international trade laws that the United States has been forced to follow for so many years. I am from a town where aluminum production has dropped, and we also are agriculture. One of the things also in this nation is that there's a big difference between manufacturing and the technology sector and agriculture. You're not going to evolve your product or just buy more land and make more. They're really strapped for agriculture, and a lot of them are Trump voters. So that's very worrying. But for manufacturing, he's absolutely right. With intellectual property, we go to China to use, cheaper labor. And then the government subsidized businesses suck up the intellectual property rights. That's a big, big problem. And I think right now, Trump's base and those voters are worried, and they are angry about China pulling a fast one on us. And this feels like sort of poetic justice in a way. Whatever the trickle-down effects are, right now they feel defended, and Trump is hitting hard right before midterms. So it's very strategic as well.
I want to shift gears and talk more about the policy of separating children. This has been in the headlines now for several days from, allegedly there are illegal immigrant parents when they cross the border. Several Democrats and even some Republicans have been publicly slamming the policy, and that includes New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She just hammered the Trump administration during an interview with Politico. She referenced the devil's schemes from the book of basically, we're running out of time, so I just want to quickly go to what she had to say. Do we have that soundbite?
Yeah, I think we do.
Let's go ahead and go to that.
What I was really talking about is there's a lot of ideas right now that are in this country that are dark ideas. Building walls, dividing this country, marginalizing trans members who are troops, marginalizing kids who are transgender, not supporting DACA kids, literally polluting our air and our water.
These are the devil's schemes too?
To me, yes. These are all things that come from the darkness, that are ripping children from their mother's arms. That's outrageous.
And then, of course, you have California Senator Dianne Feinstein attacking the Trump administration and likening the policy to Nazi Germany.
This is the United States of America. It isn't Nazi Germany. And there's a difference. And we don't take children from their parents until now. And I think it's such a sad day. People are so upset.
30 seconds remaining for your comment on
Actually, we're going to get their comments coming up right. Yeah, let's go to the commercial break. So stay right where you are. We're going to get you to weigh in and tell us whether or not you support the president's zero tolerance policy on this issue when we come back.
Welcome back to America Talks Live. Still with us, Lindsay France and Ed Pasquale. Let's finish up our discussion now. We want to talk about this policy of separating illegal immigrant children from their families at the border. You heard Senator Dianne Feinstein compare this to Nazi Germany. It's a bit ridiculous because Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen put things in perspective with some facts yesterday. She said that of the 12,000 children, 10,000 were unaccompanied minors at the border. We know from a 2015 report in the Washington Post that just under 80% of those were being used as kids who are probes for the drug cartels, for the human traffickers, and 2,000 of the kids currently held were separated at the border, but from parents that either had a pending criminal proceeding, the kids were either potentially in danger, or they couldn't prove that the adult was in fact the parent. So Ed, I'm going to start with you, Lindsay, same question. Isn't this just more, let's call it what it is, fake news from the Democrats trying to play on emotions while ignoring the facts, the statistics, and the data from the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, let's be up front. The visual is not good, and the Democrats are using it to their political advantage, because particularly those in Congress, if you don't like the law that was enforced by both Obama administration and now the Trump administration, then change the law like President Trump is talking about. But you bring up a couple key points. Many of those children are subject to human trafficking, so where the adult cannot prove that it has a parental relationship with the child, they must be separated because that adult could be trafficking kids. Do you want to encourage that at your border? The answer is absolutely not. Second is, if the parent or not, the adult has some criminal background, do we want to take down our borders and let them in? The answer is no, not without some level of vetting. So the answer really comes down to, aside from the visual, is do we have a border or not? And are we willing to do what's necessary to protect those who live in this country legally from those who want to try to basically overload our immigration system by probing and testing both through human trafficking and people who otherwise shouldn't be here, by allowing this kind of tail to wag the dog issue drive the debate. And it's all politics. All of it is politics.
Ed, we're going to have to leave it there. But Lindsay, I want you to weigh in on this very issue, the question that he raised, when we come back. You're watching America Talks Live. To take a look at some of the stories that are trending on Newsmax.com. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' net worth is reportedly more than $140 billion. Forbes reports that Microsoft CEO Bill Gates is in a distant second, as his net worth is a little more than $92 billion. Bezos has gotten $43.7 billion richer this year alone, in case you're keeping track there, John. And theaters showing the hit film Incredibles 2 are warning moviegoers that the film could cause seizures. Multiple people said that they saw warnings that the movie's flashing lights may affect people who have epilepsy. It made a record-breaking $180 million its opening weekend. And as always, for much more on these stories, visit Newsmax.com.
And welcome back to America Talks Live. And we're here with Lindsay France and Ed Pasquale. Lindsay is the host of the Politics of Business, and Ed is a veteran attorney and president of the Tripp Scott law firm. Before the break, we were talking about the policy of separating children from their parents when they cross the border illegally. And Lindsay, we wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on that before we move on.
Well, I think addressing the liberal media in particular, if the American people felt that the liberal left were addressing the visuals, showing us what's happening, but then also addressing the facts behind the situation and stopping the yeah, but argument, Trump's base and many Republicans do not care about what the liberal media's commentary says or galvanizing their own base. One of the things that the Trump administration, and I think Secretary Nielsen is on thin ice right now. I think she's going to suffer a big political fallout over this. But I think that they need to get their messaging straight. They are not using an outlined law. They're using something that is allowed, but it's not in the law. Also, another thing is that, invoking God and things like that by Jeff Sessions, they are creating arguments people can poke holes in. And one of the things that Trump stands to lose are the female swing voters that voted Obama and swung to Trump. That's something you don't want to lose. And so what's happening is they're pushing the issue with something provocative that makes people alarmed, and it's forcing Congress to finally grow up and make unpopular decisions, which we all know no one wants to do because it doesn't get you reelected. So this terrible thing is forcing an issue, and we are unfortunately watching tiny, tiny children ripped from their mother's arms. And this is what it takes to force a vote by Congress? I think we should be ashamed.
Well, the majority of registered Republican voters actually support the policy, at least according to polling, the latest Quinnipiac University poll. 55% of them, of GOP voters, say that they back the policy, and only 35% say they oppose it. What do you make of that?
It's no surprise. I think that the people feel... Oh, I'm sorry. Was that me or him?
I was going back to you, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Let's get you, Lindsay, because then I have a point I want to make about that. So, Lindsay, go ahead. Finish.
I just want to say that it's not at all a surprise. I think that people, especially taxpayers in those border states, are so wrung out. I reported in Los Angeles for a while, and I saw that they could not afford the school districts because they were so overcrowded, and people are wrung out. These are high-tax states, and they are sick and tired of it. I'm not at all surprised.
Ed, I would argue that even more voters support this policy because I dug into the crosstabs of this poll. The sample of this poll was 21% Republican, 36% Democrat, 39% independent, but unidentified how those independents lean, because in the same poll, it said that 67% of Americans would like illegal immigrants to be able to stay here with a path to citizenship. I simply do not believe those numbers. What do you say, Ed?
I don't believe those numbers either, because there's polling out there that says 55% of Americans want to restrict legal immigration and do away with illegal immigration. So we're talking about legal immigration, where a majority of Republicans really want to restrict that. So the idea of chain migration and some of those, all that should be addressed. Look, the bottom line is, Lindsay makes a great point. Congress needs to get to the table and change the law if they don't like it in a more comprehensive plan. President Trump has offered that kind of plan, but no one there, especially Democrats, they don't want solutions. They want political issues. The American people need to understand that our political class is failing us because they do not want solutions. They simply want political issues to rail about. That's the problem here in the essence of it. That's it.
Real quickly, when you say law, though, as Lindsay just said, this isn't a law. This is just a policy. The president could just pick up the phone and say, stop doing it. So what do you mean by changing the law?
But But look, the law allows for the president and the enforcement of. Look, here's the underlying policy. Let me just understand.
But he doesn't have to do that.
Underlying policy is to but they don't want to encourage human trafficking. No one is in favor of human trafficking. That's the way this debate should be framed. Because when you have an adult come to the border claiming asylum with 2 children, there's 2 things that need to happen. One is they have to prove they're actually a parent, and if they are a parent, then the question is, do they have any background that would prevent them from coming in, like a criminal background? But if they're not a parent, that means that what you're doing is you're basically have no border control at all, because all I have to do is show up to your border with children, and I have no way to hold you anywhere because I have no choice. When I put you in custody, what do I do with you? Do I release you inside the United States pending your due process hearing? Because if I do, then I'm going to lose track and I'm going to lose control of my border. That's the essence of the policy as to what President Trump is trying to prevent, 1, and 2, to prevent the encouragement of human trafficking of young children coming from Central and South America. Those are 2 big issues that no one wants to talk about in the frame of this debate.
Well,
Lindsay, one quick question, Gina. Lindsay, because I want to go to something you said. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The White House and the Department of Homeland Security are doing a terrible messaging job here. What I didn't understand is why, after Nielsen said 10,000 of the 12,000 were unaccompanied minors, didn't they throw it back on the Democrats and say, so Nancy Pelosi, so Chuck Schumer, are you saying that you want us to hand these kids back to the cartels and the coyotes? Wouldn't that be effective messaging, Lindsay, coming from the Trump administration, that these kids are not in prison, that they're being safeguarded by HHS instead of being sent back across the desert into the hands of the Sinaloa cartel and human smuggling rings?
Right. And I think one of the things they also need to include in that is how these children are being treated. If they have, blankets and bedrooms and things like that. But if they want to frame it as if they're at summer camp, that's incorrect. If they want to say we are doing the very best we can for these children, here's how we're doing it, this is what we're doing. But I agree with you that the messaging, when you get it down to brass tacks and you say we're doing the very best we can, we're also protecting these children, here are the numbers, and basically letting an adult cross a border who cannot prove parenthood for a child is dangerous. There could be people in divorce proceedings and the dad or the mother takes the child. They're not using numbers and also using some compassion as well. Easily done. Where are they?
I agree.
And they're also not putting them in dog cages. Those pictures, I think it's very important to delineate that those were from the Obama period of enforcement of this policy, not the Trump period. And I also think it's important to say that they come to the border and they have a chance to turn around and go back to Mexico if they don't want to be separated from their children. And I don't understand why no one's pointing that out either.
All right, we are going to have to say goodbye right now. The president is getting ready to take to the